We are back with more NBA playoff coverage, and in this one, I will be covering all the Game 5 action in the conference finals round. To get things started with the Timberwolves and the Thunder, let's just put it like this. They started all about as perfectly as a team facing elimination in a situation like this could. Like, there was a specific possession on, literally the first one in the game, where they did a good job of containing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander throughout the course of that entire possession, and they forced the ball into other players' hands, eventually leading to a missed shot and then a turnover. That was something that I thought the Timberwolves would stick to doing over the rest of the game. But looks can be deceiving, because after that, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just took it over completely. And honestly, that's what the game ended up coming down to in reality. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at multiple points, whether he was driving in the paint to pass it out to other open shooters or create his own shot, he was aggressive from the onset. He wanted, as I repeatedly said multiple times while watching the broadcast, he wanted the kill shot. He wanted to send Minnesota home. And it became more apparent over the course of the game that Anthony Edwards did not want to keep the season alive. In reality, at least it didn't show that way it didn't appear that way with how he was playing. I mean, quite literally, they made him a non-factor and forced the ball into guys like Julius Randle's hands and sometimes Naz Reid's hands to control the offense. He was not a factor. They were running him off the three-point line, and when it came to driving in the paint, they had the bodies there to deter him from getting shots up. And as other people started to touch the ball on these possessions, it just became incredibly worse for the Timberwolves. Now, in the first half, it wasn't all bad. I mean, it was a 13-7 ball game at around the halfway mark. But still, you just knew that something inevitably was going to go wrong if the Timberwolves didn't properly adjust. And what do you know? The Thunder would literally end the quarter on a 13-2 run. I shit you not. The Timberwolves could not get a damn shot to fall whatsoever. And the turnovers that they committed just became worse and worse. I mean, Naz Reid had one on one possession. You get another one from him later as he just gets his pockets picked by fucking Isaiah Hartenstein. And then later on in the first quarter, you had a chance for Nickeil Alexander-Walker to force an errant play, but for whatever reason, he decided to just throw the ball right back. He decided to get the ball out of bounds and just catch it straight up. At that point, I knew it was just going to be a done deal. They stood no chance whatsoever at that point. Like, now obviously it's not just Anthony Edwards here, of course. I mean, the whole team struggled, but at the same time, knowing that he is a primary ball handler and their franchise player, they needed him to dictate the tone of the game, akin to what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was doing on the other side. Because once he got that going, the Timberwolves did not have any answer for that whatsoever. It was Anthony Edwards' job to put the Thunder defense in that exact same position, which is not an easy task. I mean, they had some very great defensive plays, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, when you're missing all of these shots collectively, and you are also just turning the ball over at such a high rate, it's just a recipe for total disaster. And this ended up becoming a meltdown of epic proportions, but not before first quarter straight out of the depths of fucking hell, to be honest with you. I mean, they were outscored 26-9. Think about that. In an elimination game, with your season on the line, you put up 9 points as a squad. It's completely fucking acceptable. And not to mention as well the damn shooting splits. During that time, they finished giving up a 13-2 run, but they also shot a combined 3 of 20 from the field and had 4 turnovers. Then as the second quarter and third quarter progressed, they would still be in a spot where they had as many made field goals, 15, as turnovers, with 15 as well. Like, they just got relentlessly worse. Jalen Williams was continuing to play well also. Julius Randle hit a few shots, but even he, in the first half, was a non-factor. And though you may look at the box score and see his output, a lot of that happened during garbage time. Like, of course, he would try to make his numbers look better down the stretch. It didn't really have an impact on how this game would end up going for them whatsoever. Terrence Shannon Jr. would get in a few minutes for them in the second quarter and try to give them a spark. He put up a good amount of points, but even he got himself into a little bit of foul trouble by making several rookie mistakes, which is fairly reasonable. You know, I can't necessarily put that on him. Like, there were possessions where you literally had him just out of position because of just a stupid turnover. And that was largely the case with some other people as well. I think Michael Conley Jr. got himself in a situation where he was in a fast break situation dealing with a 1-on-2 matchup. He had no choice but to foul, and it wasn't necessarily his fault because they committed a dumb turnover on the other side of the court. So if you're going to have your smallest player in there getting matched up on a team that is much larger in size overall compared to his stature, you're asking for trouble. And that repeatedly happened. Gobert was also ineffective because of course he was. But the one thing that they could hang their hat on, at least in a few of these games, is the fact that their bench did produce. But again, on this night, they couldn't find that whatsoever. You know, a lot of this was accrued in garbage time, but when it counted, they were not truly gelling any sort of good offense whatsoever. It just was not a good game for them. And that's probably the understatement of the century. Like, there's nothing really more I can say about the play-by-play process of this entire game, because when you look at it, 124-94 victory for the Thunder as they would clinch the series and head to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals, giving themselves ample rest too. And to think that this honestly could have been much worse, because that's just how bad the Timberwolves were, and that is how suffocating the Thunder defense was. I mean, whether you look at guys like Cason Wallace and Alex Caruso all the time, again, they're not necessarily players who are going to have stats that jump off the page at you. But when it comes to their relentless intensity on both sides of the basketball, man, especially defense, like Cason Wallace was able to just switch on damn near every ball handler for that team and force them to give it up or force them into making a stupid decision every single time. And to think that Cason Wallace also doesn't really have a comparable stature in most situations with some of the matchups that he dealt with, that still didn't end up mattering. They could not and would not, for the most part, get their way against a defender as sound as he was. Same thing with Alex Caruso. We're talking about a person who is very, very, I'm not going to say frail, but he doesn't have the same type of weight as you would expect in your typical wing. Yet still, you're giving guys like Julius Randle problems on that front, despite him trying to do as best as he can to play his brand of bully ball. Moving on to the numbers, though. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would win the Western Conference Finals MVP after his series-clinching performance of 34 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists with 2 steals on 14 of 25, shooting with 2 threes. Just brilliance from him. And the complete and total contrast to whatever the hell Anthony Edwards was doing in this game. I'm not saying that he had to put up these exact numbers, but he was an all-around presence, literally from the first few minutes of the game. And Anthony Edwards, at the very least, had to just match that level of intensity and effort. He did not. For a multitude of reasons, of course. Obviously, the defense put enough pressure on him, but at the same time, the greatest playmakers and the greatest players in general find a way to break through regardless of coverage. He's a young player. He'll learn with time, but jeez, man. As for Chet Holmgren, he had 22 points and 7 rebounds on 8 of 13, shooting with 2 threes. Jalen Williams had 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists on 7 of 14, shooting with a 3. Lucian Dort had 12, and Isaiah Joe stepped in late and had 11. As for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards had 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists. 7 of 18, shooting with just a single 3 on 7 attempts. Now, again, there was a stretch of time where, I guess, you had Julius Randle hitting shots and things, and they were actually able to get the lead down close to 20 at some point in the third quarter, because, again, over the course of the last few games, they had won the third quarter, and that did end up paying dividends in their only win during this time. But still, even all of that success in that brief little run was capped off with a turnover leading into an easy possession that got the Thunder right back on track to handle their business. Julius Randle had 24 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists on 8 of 14, shooting with 4 threes. But again, that's all off of volume. Do not be fooled by that, I promise you. Naz Reid and Terrence Shannon Jr. had 11 points off the bench as well. Michael Conley Jr. and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, on the other hand, both went scoreless, which is just a damn shame. And, it does suck for Michael Conley Jr. They were holding the press conference after, and even Anthony Edwards alluded to it, but, if you remember earlier in the season, they were essentially having him say something along the lines of, do it for me. I don't know how many more chances I'll have in the league. Because, again, Michael Conley Jr. has been in the NBA for quite a while. And he has gone through one of the more interesting paths you'll ever really see. I mean, obviously that team in Memphis was legendary, even if they never truly reached any sort of contention in that city. But to go from that is a sound cog on that squad, averaging 14.9 points and 5.7 assists per game in 12 years with that franchise. And then moving on to the Jazz, becoming a first-time All-Star? Like, he's found very solid elements, glimpses of success in these places. Yet, he's never been able to crack the code. He's never done it. At no one point in his NBA career. And that just sucks. That truly sucks for him to have to deal with. This team had a fighting chance the last couple of years. And last year it was Luka Doncic just raining on the entire parade. This year, I mean, it's like, yes, you knew that you were going to be dealing with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander anyways, of course. But they're going to look back on this series, and they are just going to have to look into all of the self-inflicted wounds that they imposed on themselves, man. Seriously. Every single game outside of this one. Because, again, like, okay, they had a chance in pretty much every single game. And the one that they got, they blew their asses out. Obviously, this one had a chance too. It was going to be much more difficult being on the road in Oklahoma City and trying to capture it, yeah. But you didn't even show any signs of life. Like, what did I say in the last one? They could not come out within the first few minutes of that game looking demoralized, disheveled, and defeated after the end to Game 4. They could not show any element of that whatsoever. Because if they played like that, they were going to lose. And look what happened. Not only did they lose, they were held under 100 points. They did not even shoot efficient by any means when it counted. And they just came out so damn sloppy. Like, some of the routine plays just became nightmare fuel for them because they couldn't even execute that right. Now again, this team is fairly young, but they've got a lot of interesting situations to deal with. There is a world in which they could find themselves back in the Western Conference Finals next season. They are built for it. In the same way, with the amount of money that they are incurring, some of these key players are probably going to have to go. For instance, Naz Reid is set to be a free agent, and as recent as today even, he's been linked to teams like Warriors. So there's a world in which they just lose him, potentially for nothing. You don't necessarily want that. You're still going to have your questions about Gobert. Again, I don't know why they gave him all that money and a new contract. It's just a very weird spot to be in. So given that, also you have to figure out what the status of Michael Conley Jr. will be. Eventually, Robert Dillingham, I would assume, would take that role in the years to come. For whatever reason, they also have Bones Highland there, which you should have him come off the bench. Like, there's just no way that you draft or get the draft rights for Robert Dillingham as a potential point guard of the future, only to have him come off the bench for an older and more frail Bones Highland. I wouldn't necessarily understand that whatsoever. You're gonna obviously have to figure out things with one of DiVincenzo or Randall, I don't think it would be truly optimal to keep both of them around. Somebody's going to command a shit ton of money, and that would have to logically force the other one out, I would believe. Everything else can be up for question, truly. But the Timberwolves are legitimately going to have to do some soul searching. As for the Thunder, though, man, they are going to be right back in it. After having another young iteration make it in 2012 with the likes of Ibaka, Harden, Durant, and Westbrook, they are now back there for the first time since that fateful year. And they're still going to be awaiting who will come out of the Eastern Conference Finals. They are just so close. But there is obviously a job that they still have to do, as multiple people iterated in the ceremony following the game. So, whatever team comes out should contribute to a pretty interesting series, although the Thunder are 2-0 against both teams in the regular season. That can be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. Obviously, the playoff atmosphere could change things, but we will just have to see what happens, because, of course, the Eastern Conference Finals are not done. And where the Timberwolves managed to just crumble completely and fold, curl up into a little ball to cap their season off, the Knicks had an entirely different plan. Now, granted, they were the team with home court advantage in this game, so obviously that would give them a little bit of a boost of momentum. But at the same time, the way they started out the game was much better, much cleaner. Because what had been killing them the entire time in these games leading up to 5 is that they just got themselves in pockets of these games where they just committed a slew of turnovers that kill all of their potential momentum. And they also had trouble withstanding fouls. Even though, as they showed on a graphic at multiple points, with Jalen Brunson off the court, for example, they had a plus 18.1 box plus minus in the previous 4 games without him. So that is very interesting. But you didn't want to have to keep getting yourself behind the 8 ball when it came to having your franchise player on the court. Also, with the way that Tyrese Halliburton played in Game 4, they had to figure out a way to get the ball out of his hands. Because with him dialing up as much pressure as he did to lead into one of the best offensive outputs of all time in a postseason game, they had to prevent any element of that from going down if they wanted to keep their season alive. And right off the rip, another adjustment came into play here. Jalen Brunson was able to go off for 14 first quarter points, and the Knicks at a certain point in time also went on a 15-7 run. Why? On multiple possessions where Brunson scored, he did not bring the ball up the court. And he didn't necessarily get the ball all the time within the first few seconds of the possession. Rather than have him be the primary ball handler on these possessions, Thibodeau committed to playing him off the ball more and drawing up plays for him, whether it be through screens or different forms of movement, to give himself more open looks, and better chances at taking and making some shots. Now, he still had to go through dealing with some tough ones because that's just how Aaron Nesmith has been against him in this overall series. But a lot of them were much cleaner than he had been getting. And that was key. That kind of start to a game got the Knicks out to a large lead, got the fan base completely into it, and the Pacers were in trouble as well. Because while all this was happening, Tyrese Halliburton was not truly a factor in terms of scoring at all, and assists as well were hard to come by. Because Bridges, especially being the primary defender on him, whether he was trying to grab him off screens or just completely stick with him on other forms of, I guess, off-ball movement around the court, there weren't truly many open lanes to get the ball into Halliburton's hands in the first place. And whenever he got it, they made sure that the paint was clogged up so he couldn't necessarily drive to create penetration and create open looks for other players. They also prevented the three-point shot as much as possible, sometimes even sending double teams on these pick and roll plays to move the ball around that way. And while the Pacers were able to withstand it a little bit, especially when the bench came in with TJ McConnell and Benedict Mathurin making a few impacts over the course of what would be a 10-2 run to end off the first quarter, this was not maintained. I mean, the Pacers would keep it close for a while, but as the second quarter went on, things just got worse and worse. They would push the lead up to double digits as Tyrese Halliburton still could not manage to break through and make a true impact on this game. Other people had to do it, whether it was Miles Turner handling the ball sometimes, whether it was Andrew Nembhard handling the ball, whether it was Pascal Siakam handling the ball. They wanted Indiana to play isolation basketball. They didn't want to have Halliburton setting any of those guys up whatsoever, because obviously they're going to have to be a team who plays in transition and who plays the fast break game in order to succeed. They were not effective in that whatsoever. And in turn, they had to play more half-court basketball. Something they haven't necessarily been accustomed to, and something that's been a relative weakness of theirs throughout the course of the season. In doing that, they were able to kind of flip the script on its ugly head. You know, they had been the team struggling with turnovers. They had been the team struggling with foul trouble. And they had been the team struggling with getting out in transition and making plays. They had yet to have a game in which they truly established their pace from the jump. That changed here. As the broadcast team said it best, honestly. Like, the Knicks were giving the Pacers a taste of their own medicine, especially when it came to the second and third quarter here. They just completely pulled away with forcing multiple turnovers on a litany of people. Whether it was Andrew Nembhard getting his pockets picked on an interception, whether it was Aaron Nesmith committing offensive fouls, and then Mitchell Robinson also just being a complete overall pest. I mean, there was this one block on Tyrese Halliburton that was just completely fucking nasty. And even then, that was off of a play where they got an extra possession. So you have that go down, and still, because, you know, the Knicks did have a little sequence as well where they did get sloppy. Like, as I just mentioned, you had them get an extra possession here. Was literally looking down at my computer at the time, and I looked back up. For whatever reason, after making a shot, the Pacers had the ball back. There's no way that can happen. But nevertheless, you would have Mitchell Robinson get in there and block the shit out of Tyrese Halliburton. And then also force Miles Turner on the ensuing rebound to turn the ball over. And that was the epitome of how this game went. That was the complete representation of how things went in this game. I kid you not. Like, Tyrese Halliburton is trying to fight off Mikal Bridges to get the basketball, and other players are trying to give themselves an open opportunity to get it from Miles Turner. At the same time, he just doesn't know what to do. He's spinning around consistently, damn near about to travel, and then he just gets the ball knocked out of his hands and off of him, out of bounds. Shit got crazy for the Knicks after that, as Mitchell Robinson would do what he's most known for after this, while Karl-Anthony Towns continued to be the steady pace that they needed. Because while Jalen Brunson was out at points in this game, Karl-Anthony Towns took it upon himself to impose his will. Now granted, when it came to the regular season, he had been doing exceptionally well against this unit. He came into this series averaging like 30.3 points per game and double-digit rebounds against them over the course of the season. So you figured that he would have games where he dominated at in this series. And when it was him in isolation basketball, especially against Miles Turner, he couldn't stop him. Pascal Siakam couldn't stop him. And when you certainly got smaller individuals guarding him off of switches and things like that, they certainly stood no chance. Now, down the stretch, the Pacers would decide to start trying to draw charges, and it was a little bit successful. So, you would have a few short runs from the Pacers, largely with Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson on the bench. And a lot of that has to be credited on the part of Mathurin as well, which has been, something they could at least hang their hat on in the last couple games. For a player that had been struggling all this time, the fact that he did try to put the team on his back and vault them in the scoring department was very much a big help, and it was an attempt, at least, to keep them honest here. Jarris Walker would also get a dumb foul, though, following that run to help the Knicks push the lead back up to 17 heading into the fourth quarter. What I will say as well for Jarris Walker, though, is that he hadn't played all series long, and at least in the minutes that he did play, not everything was peachy, but when you look at it, for what he had to do in those specific moments, he played exceptional defense, forcing guys like Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges into pretty dumb shots. And then when it came to the three-pointer as well, he got a few to drop. Like this one to help the Pacers push the lead down to 12. Like, it wasn't completely over. They had a chance to fight back. But once more, when the Knicks had to tighten up and force the Pacers to turn the ball over, they did exactly that. They had Josh Hart making shots, and they were able to conserve Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson enough to where later on in the fourth quarter, after having Jalen Brunson get a 15-point third quarter, he would be able to close out the game. And the Knicks were able to do just that, avoiding similar sequences as the Game 1 disaster earlier in the series. Man, if they would have undergone a repeat of that, you would not have heard anything from Knicks fans for like the next few months. They would just be completely going through it. I'm not going to lie to you. But that didn't happen here. Compared to the bullshit that the Timberwolves pulled off. The Knicks protected home court and showed how a team should be doing their best to keep their season alive, winning 111-94 to decrease the series lead to 3-2 and, set themselves up for at least a chance to make the improbable happen starting tonight. As for the numbers, I will preface by saying that they did mention on a graphic that Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns were the first pair of teammates since Shaq and Kobe on the Lakers to each record 5 straight 20-point games to open a conference final series. No matter how things have been going in this overall thing, you can't necessarily say that the blame is all on them. Of course, at least when it comes to how they're handling their offense. Now, obviously, defense is a totally different thing, and both of them have gotten picked on. Karl Anthony Towns still has the most fouls overall in the playoffs, including the most offensive fouls. So that's just helped the Pacers even more in times where they might be trying to make a push back into a game. Because if those core players aren't on the court, it makes the job much easier for their overall defense and just accelerates their offensive potential. But that's still reasonable contributions from those two. Jalen Brunson literally had 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists in this game on 12 of 18 shooting with 4 threes. As for Karl Anthony Towns, he had 24 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 assists on 10 of 20 shooting with a 3. Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart had 12, while Hart added 10 rebounds as well. And OG Anunoby had 11 points, 3 assists, and 4 rebounds on horrible shooting. Very horrible shooting. Still, his defense was good enough to get the job done. As for the Pacers, through and through, while it wasn't just him, the team felt it completely. Tyrese Halliburton had a huge stinker in this one. There's no other way to say it. No, he didn't turn the ball over, but 8 points, 6 assists, 2 rebounds on 2 of 7 shooting without a single 3 for him is in a very inefficient ball game. And in large, it hurt the team. Without being able to have their shots, a majority of their shots, be set up by him, they had a hard time with converting on much of anything. And a lot of those other guys, outside of potentially TJ McConnell off the bench and Andrew Nembhard when he's on, outside of that, you're not really relying on these people to put the ball on the floor and generate offense that way. That's not how this team operates at their best. And by forcing them to do that, their entire game plan was flipped and altered to where there was almost nothing they could do about it whatsoever. And key phrase to say when Andrew Nembhard is on and going, because for the past few games, he has struggled out there. He was getting picked on defensively as Jalen Brunson just took it straight to him on multiple occasions, and Josh Hart was even able to have his way a few times. On offense as well, Andrew Nembhard had just 6 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist on 3 of 8 shooting without any three-pointer. We're talking about a player who does typically rise in the playoffs, but this overall series for him has been a struggle. It is not something we're truly accustomed to seeing from him in this stretch. I'm not going to lie to you. But, okay, yeah, let's see about Is I would just much rather look at the entire thing. They said coming into the game, I think he had a total of 40 points in the series. But, yeah. Okay, yeah, right here. Averaging 9 points on 38.6% shooting in this series, with 3 rebounds and 2.6 assists. You'd expect much better from him. That's all I'm saying. He has yet to have a truly spectacular game in this one. And honestly, a player of his respective caliber in the playoffs, obviously, I'm not going to say he's the greatest playoff riser out there, but he typically performs better than this. So, when I look at this game overall, the Knicks do have the momentum and they have a chance. Still, I do think the Pacers can close this out tonight. I do also think that Nembhard, given his position, he is probably due for a game at this point. Because if Mathurin can have a game where he goes off for 23 points and 9 rebounds to lead the squad in 25 minutes after setting a record for the lowest amount of minutes played for any 20-point game in playoff history on 6 of 10 shooting with 2 threes, Nembhard can get something to go for them in this one. Pascal Siakam had 15 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists with 3 steals as the only starter to have double-digit attempts on 5 of 13 shooting and also double-digit points. Obi Toppin also had 11 points off the bench on 4 of 10 shooting. Yeah, the Knicks played at their pace for the first time in this game. The Pacers never led and also scored fewer than 100 points in the very first time in this playoff run, while shooting a horrific percentage. They did win the 3-point battle, shooting just a little bit better than the Knicks as well, but 3-pointers are not the Knicks' bread and butter. And when you look at the fact that they were able to have those advantages in transition and on turnovers as well, while also being able to get as many extra shots up as they did. I mean, the Pacers had just 74 combined shots. The Pacers not only gave up 15 more made field goals, but also 15 more attempts. Well, 14 more made field goals and 15 more attempts. This is a 17-point difference. If the Knicks can get that to go again, they have a shot. There is a real chance that they could do it. But I don't see it. But that'll do it as far as all the game action goes. To move on to the developments, and this one is a very serious one. Now, I can't necessarily use all the specific language, but what I can tell you is that Zion Williamson, if these allegations are found to be true in some fashion, is in a lot of shit at this current moment of time, because on Thursday they detailed, according to multiple sources, that there was a lawsuit filed in the Los Angeles Superior Court levied against Zion Williamson by an unidentified woman. She's going to go with an anonymous name, and she also alludes to the fact that she is Zion's ex-girlfriend as well, with an apparent prior history in terms of dating from 2018 to 2023, as also outlined by multiple sources. And it is accusing him of a litany of different shit, which again, if true, is just utterly disgusting. Again, I can't necessarily say the main stuff, of course. Like, you have him being accused of R word, according to this article from CBS Sports. They detail essentially that there was just a years long experience of abusive, controlling, and threatening behavior over a 5-year relationship that began during the former five-star's career at Duke, end quote. Again, not a lot of information out at this point. So one cannot really assume anything, but you just have to look at this at face value, and it's just utterly horrible to see. Not here to say that anybody is guilty or not guilty, of course. Only time will tell as this potential lawsuit, and if it turns into anything more, once all of that gets underway, we'll truly be able to find out then. And even then, in cases like these, some of these cases, when it comes to these players, usually get settled out of court, and honestly don't really see any sort of time in front of any jury whatsoever. There are a few that do, and in some cases the defendants are found guilty, in some cases they are not. So this could really go any way. Meanwhile, for this article, according to this article from USA Today Sports, it also details that, according to the lawsuit, in quotes, which was filed in the Los Angeles Superior Court and obtained by USA Today Sports, Williamson is being sued for assault, battery, sexual battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, domestic violence, stalking, burglary, false imprisonment, and conversion, which is taking someone's property without their consent. So we're not even only talking about situations with them in the relationship. Now we're dealing with even more extreme stuff, potentially. Obviously, all of these are allegations, right? But if found to be true, now we're dealing with a potential situation where you're trying your best to just ruin this person's life post-relationship as best as you possibly can. At that point, infliction of emotional distress intentionally honestly makes sense in that specific situation. Typically it is hard for a person to move on from that kind of thing anyways. So honestly, I'd imagine that most people in most relationships would be guilty of this in some way when it comes to trying to intentionally inflict emotional distress on the other person. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. Whether it be through different forms of media, like different posts, showing off different people in their lives, or just, showing how comfortable they are in their own skin with being as potentially fucked up or just, happy-go-lucky as they can be. That might get into the other person's head if they're still in contact with the person in some way through different forms of media and just consuming that the whole time. So that's one way you could intentionally inflict emotional distress on a person, if we're going to be completely honest. You have that route. But this is more brazen, clearly, to try to take someone's property without their consent, allegedly, to stalk someone, allegedly, and to try to intimidate, other people around this specific individual, allegedly. Yeah, you're certainly, that's not okay. Like, as it says here as well, yeah. Okay, according to this article as well, it states, in quote, according to the lawsuit, the two-time All-Star threatened the accuser by saying his security guard would shoot her in the head while the security guard was present and carrying a loaded firearm multiple times in Louisiana between 2000 and 2023, and threatening to have his paid security guard kill plaintiff's parents after informing plaintiff that he knows their home dressed multiple times in Louisiana between 2020 and 2023. Yeah, that's more outright compared to the definition of intentional infliction of emotional distress that I gave. Like, you're literally trying to ruin this person's life, allegedly. I have to keep reinforcing that because, again, there's no validity to these claims just yet. We don't know if there ever will be, honestly. So everything's just up for speculation right now. We like, this is all just hyperbole. It's not fact right now. I just want to make that very clear. But if this is true, that fits the definition to a T of at least how they're trying to frame it in this particular lawsuit. Because there's just like, damn, like, why do you want to do that? Why would you want to have a hired gun do that to their parents? It's like, whoa. Like, okay. At the same time as well, man, you really just hope that this person, if these things are really going on, you hope that this person remains safe and can actually get her due in a potential court if these things are true. And if not, it's just yet another unfortunate situation where you have these people trying to deter the pathways of these particular people trying to move on with their lives and make better livings for themselves. You just hate to see people get wrapped up into it generally. And if it wasn't true and you're just throwing this case out there to get whatever type of negative press towards Zion Williamson whatsoever, it's a shame. It does remind me a lot of Matt Ariza's case, actually, in the same way. Obviously, that didn't end up being true, and that was just a huge waste of time. We don't know about it with this one. But, again, only time will tell. And if it does actually see court, only the jury can truly determine that in that moment. As for Zion Williamson, this is just yet another distraction for him on a career that has largely underwhelmed. Now, I'm not going to say that he's a bust, but a lot of this potential negative press towards Zion Williamson has been granted through his own actions, on his own volition. Whether it's him just consistently playing above a legitimately healthy weight, or just missing years worth of his NBA career due to injuries. He's only played, like, I think somebody stated, he's only played like 2.5 seasons overall in his career, which is now 6 full seasons. So that's a huge chunk of missed time, missed opportunity to make his true claim to superstardom with this franchise. And while the Pelicans want to see him as their franchise player, with all of the combinations of these injuries and these specific clauses forcing him to get into reasonable shape or dealing with all of these other off-the-court issues, man, it's going to be much harder to commit to him down the line. And there is honestly a world in which they choose to move on from him. I mean, it wouldn't be hard for them. You see how they already moved on from Brandon Ingram. It would not be a difficult task to get him out of there if they so chose to do it. But again, we'll see what happens as things continue to develop and they continue to get reported on. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.